Episode number 290, 7 Tips for Video Directors with Alex Sawyer. Let's do it.
This is the definitive podcast for helping you plan, create, and execute dynamic worship experiences at your church. Useful, practical content in the areas of production, worship, communications, first impressions, and more. This is Making Sunday Happen.
Hey guys, this is the Making Sunday Happen podcast. We are helping you transform your physical and online worship experiences each week. Be sure to check out our website at 1230.media. That's 1230.media, no .com. Change it out for .media, so 1230.media. We're loading up our ready-made media library with tons and tons of fresh content. It's mini movies, packs, countdowns, worship backgrounds, title graphics, lyric media, full series boxes. Now, these are full sermon kits with everything that you need for a sermon series at your church in the areas of graphics and video. We provide a short teaching outline as well to get you started, but we load you down with Photoshop design files, banners, social media images, sermon bumper, trailers, countdown, and more, all matching series content. So when you're doing a series, this is where to come to for everything graphically and video that you need. So you preach your own sermon, but we are making the creative elements super easy for you. You can go to sermonkits.com to see those directly, sermonkits.com to check out our sermon kits we call Series in a Box, so you can check those out. Again, sermonkits.com. This week on the show, I'll be talking with Alex Sawyer. Alex is a tech director at a church and also runs the productionpastor.com. That's a great resource for you to gain some knowledge on church media. It's audio, video, lighting, and more. Alex and I will be chatting today about tips for video directors. So if you have IMAG or image magnification at your church, it's a technical lingo for cameras on screen. We're talking today about the importance of transitions, your lingo on comms, framing and composition, white balance, and more. So get ready to dive into a quick masterclass on video directing at your church. First, let's check the mailbag. Here we go. For the mailbag this week, I want to answer a question that our team gets occasionally. And the question is, what should I do about announcements at my church? Should I use still graphics? Should we do video announcements? Is there a better way to visually share announcements on screen that gets noticed? So I'll answer these questions one by one. Okay, so what should I do about announcements? Well, I would have an announcement loop on screen before your service in the live and in your online environments as people are entering and exiting your service. So that still relevant, still viable, still a way that you can get information to people. So should I do announcements? Yes, I would have a loop on screen in both your live and your online worship experiences. All right, so should I use still graphics that loop? All right, so here's my answer here. If that's what you can do, yes. So I'll share a fresh way that you can do announcements like this, a loop, here in a second. But let me first answer the question, should I do video announcements? Okay, we produce video announcements with our custom media services at 1230 Media. But here's the deal. It really depends on your culture whether these are going to work or not. So if you have good talent, or you can come to us. We can provide talent if you need. But if you have good talent and can spend the time to do them, and it's worth the time or the money or the effort to do them, then do it. But it might not be the perfect fit for your culture, and that's okay. And here I am, a media company that do announcements, and I'm still telling you, it really depends on your culture whether they are a good fit for your church. So you might be in a culture where no one watches announcements, so it's not worth your time or your money. I was in a church on staff, and we did video announcements. and I had a guy under me that did the editing of these. He shot it, edited it each week. And it's going to take you 2 days strong to coordinate the shoot, get all the gear ready, shoot the announcements, get all the footage in, edit it the way it needs to, coordinate with 5,000 different ministries to make sure that the right information is getting in the right announcement, and then you have to change it 5,000 times. Can I get an amen? Yeah, that happens. So this was at the church that I served, and I realized, we're spending 2 days on this, and no one is watching them. Like I'm walking into the room, I'm looking at people. No one is paying attention, and we put it in multiple places in the service to see if people, if they would work better. They didn't really work, and so we took them out. We stopped doing video announcements, and I repurposed that video guy to make different things. So instead, we spent our time doing testimonial videos and things like that. So I've been on staff at a church that we removed video announcements, but I've also seen them work great in other churches. You might use your countdown as the place where your video announcement can land, so that everybody's already pretty much in the room and their attention is there. So also, you might have a great talent pool at your church and a video editor that can crank them out quickly. So it might work for you. I would suggest that if you don't have a good talent pool, that's going to matter. So you want to make sure that you have great talent on screen, whether you use a company to do that or whether you do them your own. If you don't have the money to spend to have a company do it with a professional talent, or you don't want that talent at your church for some reason, doesn't fit your culture. If you don't have the money and the resources to do that, and you don't have a good way to shoot great talent consistently and edit these, I would suggest you not do them. I would suggest another way for announcements. So you might do them for a season. You might do them once a month or something like that to keep it fresh and not monotonous. The bottom line here on video announcements is it depends on the culture. Okay, so you might try them and see if they work, and if not, you can pull the plug or go a different direction. Okay, so here is my new and fresh way. It's not new to some people. Some churches already use these, but I want to give you a new idea, a new concept to kind of chew on for announcements. Okay, we call them motion announcements. Now, let me share this as another option that your church might consider. So, motion announcements are self-contained short videos, and they're usually produced by a motion designer, and these work as motion graphics pieces that add life and movement to your announcement. So think of a still slide, but that all the text, the imagery is moving picture. So it animates the text in. Maybe there's actual footage that's in the background instead of a still image or still photo. So it adds life, it adds movement, it catches the eye, it keeps attention. So a couple of reasons why I would explore this route if I'm your church. The first reason is video works better than a still image. Video. The stats on video are unbelievable, out of this world. You're gonna not. I'll share them on the podcast, or you can read on our blog about the stats on video. Staggering numbers of people spend over 90 minutes a day watching video. So just think that out of your 24-hour day, you're spending 90 minutes watching video of some kind on your phone or on your computer or wherever. So I say that to say video works better than a still image. Second reason is stills are static. We live in a video culture. A moving image grabs your attention faster and longer than a still graphic. Also, they're versatile and interactive. So you can use motion announcements outside of your worship experience on your social media channels, as content for your screens in your lobby areas, on your website, things like that. So if you need help making these for your church, feel free to reach out to our team. We would love to help you make these. If you need that, you can call us 910-849-1230 or visit 1230.media/custom. That's 1230.media/custom to learn more. So 1230 not .com, 1230.media. Just type that into your browser, click on the custom media tab on our website, and get more information there. Or, if you have somebody on staff that can do this, I would highly suggest if you have a motion designer on staff in your creative department, you might try leaning into that person to give these a shot at your church. Okay, so we're here to help if you need it. Or again, you might have a creative member on your team, on your staff that can make these happen for you to give those motion announcements a try. Either way, I would consider incorporating motion announcements. Just kind of see what response you might get. Okay. If you have a question or a photo to send in for the mailbag, we love sharing photos. We love answering questions on our mailbag segment. I know this one was a little longer than normal, but I wanted to give you enough information to answer this because we get that question quite a bit. What do we do about announcements? So I wanted to give you some information on that. All right. So if you want to send anything into the mailbag, feel free to email me, carl@1230.media, or you can find me on social media at Carl Barnhill. Feel free to send that in. All right. My chat with the production pastor, Alex Sawyer, is coming up right after this. Hey guys, I wanted to let you know about a brand new movie coming out this Easter called The Resurrection. It is a reworked feature film using footage from the Bible miniseries as well as the movie Son of God. It is produced by Roma Downey and Mark Burnett, both powerhouse Christians that are producers in Hollywood. I sat down with Roma for a few minutes to talk about the film, so I'm going to let you hear a small clip of my conversation with Roma Downey. Check this out.
As we are going to talk about my film Resurrection today, I can't help but think, though, of the parallels in some ways that we've all been in our own tombs. We've all been inside, locked in, and that we're all longing for a personal resurrection of sorts, a resurrection of our lives as they used to be, a resurrection of our economy, our businesses, to get back to our lives. So I feel like the film is maybe important in ways we hadn't really fully considered. But we're grateful that it was ready in time for this Easter, because I think we do need a story of hope to gather around in the safety of our homes for this Easter holiday. And Resurrection is that movie. And we really thought that it would lend itself well to a theatrical experience. We were hoping it would go into theaters. But around Christmas time, it became obvious that the theaters weren't opening, or they were opening sporadically. And, we didn't know if it would be safe for people to gather in theaters. So we're delighted anyway that we got this partnership with Discovery Plus. It's a brand new platform, lovely platform, really great content on there, lots of family-friendly content, which was important to us as we looked for a partner. Because if we're inviting people to come over to Discovery Plus to watch our movie, we want them to know that there's lots of other things there that they would enjoy as well, and that it's appropriate place for their kids. It's important to me as a mum. I didn't want them, everything is very family friendly. And so we're delighted that, that it goes up on the 27th of March, and it'll play there all throughout Easter.
To catch my full 15-minute interview with Roma Downey, you can visit the show notes page for this episode at makingsundayhappen.com/290. That's makingsundayhappen.com/290. Hey guys, today I welcome Alex Sawyer from theproductionpastor.com. Alex has been working in church production since he was a kid. He's a worship leader, creative artist, and audio engineer. Currently serves as the tech director at Third Church in Richmond, Virginia. Alex, welcome, man. Thanks for hanging out.
Thank you very much for having me. Excited to be here.
How's the weather up in Virginia?
It has been a crazy few weeks. We've had ice storms, the worst that have happened in years here in Virginia. They didn't seem that bad, and they would get progressively worse. So it iced for one day, and it was like, oh, no big deal. And then the next 2 or 3 days, trees would get heavier and heavier, and then they'd fall down and cause power issues. And so we had some interesting Sundays for sure.
Yeah, I bet so. Well, speaking of your church, give me a little taste of what you do there at Third Church.
Well, as of recently, we've had some changes. So the IT part of my job no longer exists, which I'm thrilled about. So I'm fully just focusing on production. And so in the time of coronavirus, that has specifically been a lot of video, mainly doing our live services, some video production during the week. And then once we get back to quote unquote normal, I'll have a lot more events and other things that are going on. So really just doing and overseeing our production. So leading the team that I have, I've got one guy who works directly with me, who's kind of my assistant production director. He and I are our staff folks. And then we've got some paid volunteers, as I like to call them, who are on the team that kind of forms our production leadership team. We work together to just lead the team, execute services, do worship to the best of our abilities. And it's kind of us.
Give me a picture of Sunday. So do you guys have multiple services? How many people does it take to run a Sunday? Things like that.
Yeah, so that's all changed during COVID, of course. Currently, what we're at is about 2 services. We used to have 3. 2 is what we simplified to with our in-person restrictions and also just the time we need to turn things around on our end. So we're not getting too stressed, but also so that facilities has enough time to pull people out, get new people in, clean anything that needs to be cleaned. Per service, we've got about 8 folks now. We've finally gotten to the point where we can have enough space for people to shadow. So we typically have a front of house audio person, a broadcast audio person, 2 to 3 camera ops, a video director, a graphics person. And then depending on the week, sometimes we'll have an A2 at front of house. Sometimes we'll have somebody else shadowing on graphics or video director. Sometimes we'll have kind of a systems engineer person based on the rotation.
So let's talk about your cameras, because that might help frame, pun intended, our conversation today. So your camera, maybe 2 on sticks, 1 on the stage, or how are your cameras set up in the room?
So we actually changed between a regular service and then a special service. So for regular services, we've got 2 on sticks. One's kind of our A cam, and one's kind of over in the corner as our B cam. And then we've actually got, for us, we're in a more traditional space. So we have an organ cam, a drum cam, and then we've got a third one that floats. It is locked down on Sundays. And so sometimes that'll be for, if we have a cellist, it'll go for cello. If it's a person on keyboard, we'll move it there week to week, depending on what's going to be featured more.
Are those GoPros, or are they set up, or do you have a manned stage cam operator?
We do not. It's all sticks, and it's all Blackmagic Pocket cameras on stage. One of them is their micro studio camera, just so that it's into our switcher. And those are all static that are locked off. However, we will change that up we just recently did our Ash Wednesday service, and so we actually pulled out 2 of those cameras off of stage. We left the drum cam, left the organ cam, but then had 2 Blackmagic Pockets that were on manned positions. One of them was on an easy rig. One of them was just on a tripod with wheels. And then our main center cam stayed in the back just on sticks. And so then we had 3 manned positions.
So I know some churches, so I've served at 2 churches, one that was a lot more accepting of a stage camera than the other. One was, they were both contemporary in style, but one church, both mega churches, but one church was a little bit more hesitant on the stage camera operator. The other one was New Spring it didn't, I mean, bring on the stage cam. We would, hook GoPros to the guitar. I mean,
totally
crazy. But how is your church, how do they handle a stage camera operator on stage, or have they gotten used to cameras in the middle of the action per se?
Yeah, that's been a big change for us. And I'm trying as a leader to gauge how far I push us in that direction. And so when we were pre-recording before the fall, when we went back into in-person and we had manned cameras, it was easier. I love when you can have a stage camera, because even moving the camera 6 inches left and right is just a whole new world of angles.
Yep.
So there's a lot of bang for the buck there. I have been hesitant with having people in view during services. I think most people have gotten used to the fact that there's going to be a camera at the back of the room and a camera over at the side. They've just kind of come to accept that. The stage cam is always a little bit more challenging because we're not in our main worship space. We're down the hall in a different room that was easier for COVID restrictions. There's not as much space. And mainly the reason is we don't have as much room for a person to really have the space they need to be able to move around. So to get some of those shots, they'd have to be a little bit more intrusive. And as well, just because of the cabling we have, we haven't found a way to clean it up yet enough where it would be really, I think, beneficial for folks. I think it'd be much more distracting. So I'm hoping to try it and see how far we can push that. And we'll kind of see where that goes from there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that sometimes it depends on the setting. It depends on how your room's set up. It depends on where you can get a camera, things like that, how distracting it is. Well, I think me and you are going to have a great time today because I love video directing. Mm-hmm. It is one of my favorite things to do. In fact, it was very hard for me in a way to train volunteers up to that position because I enjoyed it so much. I mean, I'm sure there's hidden camera videos of me dancing when I'm very, very animated when I direct. So I love this topic. So we're going to talk through 7 ways that we can improve our video directing skills. So let's start by defining terms because we have a lot of people that listen to this podcast that could be just getting started. Very, very elementary. And then we have churches that, a stage camera operator is an every week occurrence. So let's define the terms. What is a video director? What is a TD?
Yeah.
Walk me through some terms here.
It was funny. I just had a conversation with a friend about these terms because I think these are actually terms we change up a little bit in the church world. So if you're used to television, which I've met a lot of people who are, mm-hmm. the tech director is actually the one who is hands on the surface that is actually calling the shots. And then next to them, they'll have a director calling what they want and the tech director will be doing it. That's right. I think for us, and at least for our church and many others that I've talked to, the video director is really the person who is doing both the directing and the switching.
That's right.
And then the technical director is still in that seat of they're calling the shots for basically the entire team. So they might be talking with audio, they might be talking with stagehands, whereas the video director is mainly just talking with camera operators, possibly with the graphics position.
Yeah. I kind of prefer the two if you can. I have a switcher operator and a video director who is watching the multicam and calling the shots.
Yeah.
It creates another volunteer position. That's probably my top plus is to separate that out. Mm-hmm. But it can be done if the same person can do both, calling the shots and hitting the actual buttons on the switcher. So, all right. So let's start kind of diving in. So your number one, I'm really excited about this one because I think that transitions, I've written on this topic of transitions because I think it's one of the most overlooked pieces of a worship experience. We know the songs that we're going to do. We know the message that we're going to do. We know that this is what we're going to do. But rarely do we talk about, okay, how does this song go into that song? Mm-hmm. How does this song go into the prayer that goes into the next song and into the video? When am I going to fire the video? Is it going to be when you do this or when I do? Like those transitions are so key. And you can kind of tell the production team and the worship team how close they're working together, I think, by how smooth the transitions are. So you want to get us started here? Number one, transitions.
Yeah. All of what you said is wonderful. I think you can always start at the basics of just knowing what's coming next. So obviously, if you're in the video director seat, you can be thinking of who is starting the song, who is leading the song, getting that planned. And so I think really a lot of thinking through transitions is actually planning with your team. So coaching your camera operators well, being ready yourself. But then there's this other lane of communication that you even just mentioned of how we talk with the worship team and are thinking through that together. So even something that I've learned in the past couple months is we just walk through, whenever we go through the service together, production staff and worship team, we just talk through who is starting and who is leading each song. And I've even drilled down further into that to specifically ask what is happening at the beginning. Because what will wind up happening is we'll have a drummer maybe do like a 4-click and then we'll hit to keys. And so instead of me saying keys starts, it's actually drum starts. And so instead of me just getting ready for the keys and having kind of a dull moment there, I can actually be really engaged and say, all right, we're going to go drums, we're going to go to keys, then we're going to hit on whoever's leading. Right. And I really think rehearsing that together, talking through it together, and just being prepared for what you want that to look like is really what makes it so successful.
Yeah, it's good. So one thing I used to do, I'd love your opinion on this, is I used to utilize the graphics, the pro-presenter position. Mm-hmm. And I would actually meet with our worship leader on Thursdays. we would talk, our teams would talk throughout the week and on Sunday as well. So everybody gets practice, but I would meet one-on-one with the worship leader during the week, and I would make labels. So per presenter has where you can label, so instead of just chorus or verse or whatever, you can put additional labels there. And we would make notes of, Jim does a drum solo here, or guitar solo here, or 3 slides left, or things like that, and actually utilize the graphics position to call that out in the middle of the service. Hey, drums in 2 slides, drum solo in 2 slides, guitar solo coming up. That clues the stage cam operator or the side cam operator to get ready for that, to start looking for that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that's great. I do rely on the graphics position, and I'm lucky to sit directly next to them. And there have been a couple times where I had to rely on that just for even the space of, I know that there's, a transition that we're doing, like a modulation that's instrumental, and seeing that blank slide there is excellent for me. The way we run it is actually a pretty similar approach, where we in Planning Center Live, we have different categories for each position. And so we go through the band category, and the band is song structure, and we'll label any of that special stuff. And then for me, I just have a column for video where I take all of my notes. And so typically you'll see intro, who's starting the song, who's leading the song. Then you'll see maybe any special elements, and then maybe any quick little bit of notes for who's ending and how I'm going to cut that, even specifically, like if I want 6 on a tight of the organ and then I want a piano shot, then drums, I can know for myself, all right, get these 3 shots set long before so the camera ops are ready. And just having those notes is super helpful, whether or not you do that in per presenter. I think I might try that. We'll see how my graphic operators feel about it and see how that goes.
I think either way, the point to it is we're planning ahead. We are planning for that moment. We're not just, drum solo. It's not like a crazy in the moment. It's planned out. And speaking of that, how do you rehearse? How is your morning set up? Do you do a full run through? How do you rehearse those transitions?
Yeah, we do. We have about 30 minutes of setup for our team, just to make sure cameras are on. Worship team has about an hour where they hit all the songs, and as they're working on it, and this is based on, they've had a Thursday night rehearsal ahead of time. So I already know structures. We've already gotten lyrics set. Camera operators join us on Sunday morning. Then we do it together. Sometimes the first 5 or 10 minutes is, hey, the white balance is off on this. We're getting that set. And then we're really rolling into it, and I'm trying to call those shots. It's easy when you have it on sticks. I would say this is even more important if you do have a stage cam, just knowing where they need to be stationed so that they can see certain angles. Because every time we've changed it up, there's always a slight difference of, I'm actually not sure what you can see from your camera and where you are crossing paths with other folks. So there's a little bit of that. And then mostly we're just running through all the songs together. We do not do a full cue to cue. We've talked about it for months, and I would love for us to do a full cue to cue because I think that would be super helpful for us. And I would say that would be probably like a signpost of where people should be looking for, that we can actually run through transitions, even if it's not full songs, and do full songs in rehearsal. But we talk through those transitions. And as we do that as a team, I'm on comms and I'm talking specifically to my camera operators and saying, so after this video today, camera 5, you're going to be set on our preaching shot. Camera 6, you're going to be here. I just need you as a cutaway in case something happens. So I kind of talk us through that. Thankfully, service structure is pretty straightforward. So we're usually on the same page, but really making sure that I know what I'm doing and I'm communicating that to my camera ops.
Good. Okay, let's move on to number 2, audio levels. Now, I admittedly am not an audio guy, so this is definitely your area. So tell me why audio levels are important to pay attention to when it comes to video directing.
Yeah, audio levels was the first thing I noticed was a big change when we went to online only at the beginning of COVID. Just because when I was listening every week, we were turning around services, and then I would actually post them online to go out to church online. And I noticed that the difference in level between music and then speech would just be you dashing for the volume button on your laptop or whatever you're watching. And so I started talking to the team about how we can get better at that. We've solved that now on our end because we have a broadcast console. But I think it's something really important to pay attention to on the user experience side, to make sure that they're not having to boost the audio levels or not getting lost in translation. I think this even in a way ties into your transitions of all of a sudden it's super loud and then it's super quiet. That's just a distracting point. So it's not necessarily anything groundbreaking, but just being intentional to think through how consistent is our audio in the same way that we would think about how consistent are we being in our white balance or consistent we're being in our shooting. How are we being consistent in our audio? And are we making that more approachable for people at home?
Do you have a different mix for the house than you do the online? How do you differentiate your mixes?
Yes, we do. Let's see how brief I can make this. We've just had different conversations on what's for front of house and what's for broadcast. So with broadcast, we've basically set up different groups. So when we are mixing, that there's an easy way for us to boost, say, a separate group between the two. But really, I think for folks who are running the two different consoles, the biggest change you have is you basically have two sets of gains that are different. So you're really mixing for broadcast. You can set the gains the way you need to separately from the entire other console. And so even just that foundational level of being able to mix has changed because you're no longer trying to work off the front of house console and make a separate aux mix that's based on something that it's not really designed for. Having a dedicated broadcast console for us means we have great gain structure. All of our compression, all of our EQ is designed specifically for the broadcast mix. There are plenty of ways to do it if you are still using off a mix, just a regular mix bus off your main console. So there's a lot of options in there based on different people's setups for sure. So
I would say years ago, I would probably prioritize the room a little bit higher than the online. I think that probably became, for me, it became, all right, let's both equal attention. Now I'm almost wondering if online gets a little more attention. Do you have, both need to be excellent, yes.
Yeah.
But has your priorities changed in what you mix for?
I would say so. At least in this current season, we're kind of a broadcast first mentality in a lot of stuff. So even how people address the cameras, even how we mix and shoot is really for broadcast primarily. We do have some folks in the room, but that has changed for sure. And it's been kind of interesting. And it is interesting to see when that actually is noticeable in service. So this past week, we had a missed mic cue in the room, but no one online noticed that missed mic cue because it was all online, but then they noticed it because the person started saying, hey, do I need a different mic?
Right.
So it's a really interesting phenomenon that we're getting into now where their experiences are two actually different things. And so there can be something that happens here that no one at home might even notice.
Right.
So it's really interesting to see how we can pioneer that together as we move forward.
Yeah, good. All right, let's move on to number 3, and that is comms lingo. So tell me about how your comms are set up and how vital is the lingo or the language on the comms for your team.
Yeah, our comms, we used to be using our dedicated Blackmagic comms. That was great. It had some limitations only for camera ops. We just recently upgraded to a full comm system where graphics, A2, if they're on broadcast, everyone's on comms together. And comms, I think, is really everything when it comes, especially to the video director role. This is the way that you talk to your team, the way you prep them, the way you encourage them. And so it goes as far as how you're calling your shots to how you're communicating with your team. There's a lot to it. So for us, we just use a simple, when I'm calling a camera, I'll say, ready camera, take camera. So ready 5, take 5. I have learned even recently is just being steady for myself as a video director in saying those things, saying them slowly, saying them clearly is really useful for the camera operators. Our camera ops do have tally, so they can see when they're live, but even just knowing that I'm about to call their camera and let them know when they're going live, I think is really helpful for them. And I've gotten feedback from folks on the team saying, if you can just always stick to this one set of lingo,
right,
it's super useful.
Right, I agree, because sometimes like it is standby 1, ready 1, like, hey, I'm coming to you 1. Like, hang on, which one am I supposed to listen to? Does that all mean the same thing?
Yeah.
Which might sound easy right now, but in the moment, it's like, you're trying to remember where if you can keep the same consistency. So talk to me about that a little bit more. So you've learned how to be concise. So instead of drawing the sentence out, you're ready 1, take 1. Ready 5, take 5. Yeah. Talk that out a little bit more.
Well, there were times that I would be trying in learning to coach the camera team was just learning that I was saying things very slowly. And so I would say, hey, camera 6, can you give me a shot of Kim and Brooke together? And so over time, we have just simplified all that language. So now I'll say 5 wide shot, so-and-so, 5 tight of Kim, just trying to get the words down so that there's not as many words that I'm saying, and then just trying to stick to those terms. So we've kind of made up our own terms. We'll say a double wide, which will typically just mean this person to this person. Or if I'm calling a shot that we don't maybe have some sort of lingo for, I'll say 5, give me Susan to Sandy. And then that will frame these 2 people in there. So it's been our own kind of culture of making, here are the terms and here's what I'm looking for. And then I think the important part is trying to make that a standard system so that a new video director could easily sit down and say, here are the terms that we've defined. These are what the cameras are looking for. This is what we're trying to call together. And it's been interesting just to hear from camera ops what's easiest for them, to hear for other video directors what's easiest for them. And I think slowly we're kind of making our own dictionary of camera terms. And that's really useful.
Yeah, you bring up a good point that the common language really helps when you're training the next video director, because if one person uses standby, another person uses ready, we're just using that as an example, but that's all across the board. Just think every single command being a different term can get overwhelming and confusing. So yeah, training is a big piece of that common language, I'm sure. How does it make it faster and more efficient, being concise and having this common language?
I've noticed that it's easier to get shots faster. And so if I'm moving around and I have a quick turnaround, or I want to do a really nice ending into the next song, being able to call those shots with the camera operators is super helpful. So planning is part of it. I think too, when you're caught in a moment where maybe something changes and you need to catch something, instead of having to say what I'm looking for, I can just say 6, give me stage wide, 5 tight on Kim. Just being able to say that quickly, they know what it is. It gets me set for what I need. So I think it's really just about the speed. And I think speed is important in the sense of we just need to be flexible at all times because stuff does change. Stuff sometimes goes wrong. I think just having that solidarity, knowing that if something does change, we can all be on the same page.
All right, let's move to number 4, framing and composition. So how do you teach your team things like the rule of thirds, these concepts how do you dumb that down is the wrong term there, but how do you bring it down to an elementary level where a volunteer of any age can understand these concepts?
The first thing I try to do is explain it to them. Just say, here's what the rule of thirds is. Here's why it's important. And then the second thing I do is try to just show that to them. So I'll either grab a frame that says, this frame is really good of a service that we've done. This frame is not so good. And I'll try to ask them what is off about this frame. What can we do to make it better? And then once they're kind of at that spot, we have a rotation of certain cameras they go through before they hit kind of the mission critical cameras. So I'll get them, say, on camera 6 for us, and I'll be able to coach them through. And sometimes we'll even run drills. And I'll just say, show me the shot, and I'll let them frame the shot. And then I'll make any adjustments and say, actually, I need a little more headroom on this shot, or I would like a little bit more lead room here, and slowly kind of coach them so that they're feeling what it is like to actually frame that shot on the camera that they're on. And I found that's pretty useful.
Good. All right. So you hit on headroom. Let's talk about headroom for a second. How do you teach them too little or too much? And how do you keep that consistent across the board?
Yeah, I basically show them what we're looking for. So the first time that they're on a camera, I'll say, give me a tight shot on this person. And then I'll let them get close. And then if they're great, I'll say, this is what I'm looking for. This has just enough headroom. I want to see this. When I'm calling for maybe a wide or a tight shot, I'll say specifically we're framing for like belt to the top of the head. I'll specifically say things that I don't want to see, which I think is useful. So I don't want to see someone's forehead cut off. I don't want to see a head cut off. I don't want to see things too awkwardly framed. I think most of all, it's pretty straightforward for the camera ops. They see it, and then I can tell them, actually, can you readjust? And once they've done that a couple of times, they seem to learn, okay, that's what he's looking for. That's how I get this shot. Pretty straightforward.
Do you find that talk to me about this idea of cinematic versus broadcast? Are you shooting for more of a cinematic look? Or are you shooting more toward capturing the more documentary style, I guess, where you're capturing the moment more for broadcast? Tell me how artistic you get.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think it also sometimes depends per camera. So it seems for us, a stage cam would be a typically more cinematic look because it can get different frame. It can be a certain amount of depth where you could have someone out in the distance, you could rack focus between. For our broadcast cameras, they might be specifically looking for certain shots because they can only get kind of a tight shot of that one person. And so we're always trying to find the balance between the two to figure out what looks best for our scenario. Specifically, I had a conversation with one of our camera ops this past week about just framing and how the rule of thirds applies to broadcast, because rule of thirds in cinematography is slightly different. It's really about balancing that frame. So you might want to see a vocalist on 1/3 and then maybe the keyboard on another. For broadcast, especially when you're doing center framing type things, which for us is okay because during the sermon, we really want pretty much the focus for our church to be on the person speaking and preaching. And so you kind of break the rule of thirds to some degree, or at least redefine them and say, for this center framing, here's what I'm looking for. And so the rule of thirds kind of applies differently. Whereas if we're shooting music and worship, or if you're a B cam or a stage cam, you might be more free to stick specifically to the rule of thirds. So it's kind of I think we're still trying to define what that looks like at our church, but it's a really interesting conversation to figure out the difference between what cameras can do that, and then how does that apply differently for different parts of service.
So you mentioned like asking a camera to give you a shot before you take it. How much, especially as we're training people, well, even still, when we're not training people, like I would ask for that, like, hey, show me what you're going to do. So I can see the shot in preview. They're going to come here and then land here. Okay, cool. I'll take that one. All right. Ready one. All right. Bringing in one. Here we go.
Yeah.
So walk me through how you test a shot out with people before you take it live.
Pretty similar to that. I really try to get to the point where I'm encouraging my camera ops to look for their own shots.
Right.
Now, there's some folks who are not really there yet. And so I give them the phrase I give them is, give me your shot and then let me correct it or coach it through if I need something different. Because I want people to feel free. I want them to feel confident as they move. And so that's usually what I'll do, especially for when we're using stage cams for a special event. I'll say, show me what you have for here, kind of just like you said. And then if they are going to do some movement like that, or maybe a rack focus or something exactly that, I'll ask them what they're planning to do. And then I'll even ask the camera maybe before or behind them to figure out how I'm going to put that together as a sequence. Right. So it's not just his shot. And I do think this is a challenge for a lot of folks, especially for me as a newer video director. If there is going to be motion, it's one thing to have the shot. It is also super important to have the next shot ready. Yes. Because if they've only planned to go a pan so far and they get stuck because they're at the end of a wall or something like that, and they're planning on just like holding there, you have to have another shot ready for them, or either give them the cue to kind of go back up. And so that's one of the ways we started doing it, is if I do have people moving, instead of just doing a fully rehearsed shot, I will get them to cover a zone or cover a person. And so instead of them maybe panning across the stage, especially if they're handheld, I'll have them on one subject and I'll actually have them kind of swaying back and forth. So you're getting the motion, but it's not necessarily a specific move from person to another. It's motion that is just maybe go up and down, maybe do this. I know some folks will say, just paint a U and do that, or paint an O and give me just like a subtle circle. So I think for us too, it's a matter of finding the way that the motion fits in without being super dependent on other cameras, just because we have different folks who are at different levels on our team.
That's a good point. I think the landing is very important. Where are you gonna stop?
Yep.
Because that helps me know what my next shot is going to be, and I can coach that next camera and go and plan out 2 or 3 shots at once. Do you, there's kind of been a move recently for all cuts in a live environment. I kind of like that. Sometimes I'll if it's a really slow song, I'll still dissolve it, depending. But I mean, at New Spring, we moved to pretty much all cuts all the time. Do you have a preference, and do you, the auto dissolve versus a T-bar approach? Like, walk me through transitions.
We've pretty similarly jumped on the cuts only bandwagon. And I've mostly said that for consistency's sake, just because before we were doing stuff, there would be a lot of changes week to week. So some people would cut all the time. Some people would dissolve all the time. And I said, whatever we do, it needs to be consistent. So the rule we have now is cuts for everything except for graphics. And specifically what I've done is I've just tweaked the graphic time on our auto cut. So no one really uses the T-bar unless we're fading a graphic to overlay over top of something. It's really the auto transition will be a super short transition into a graphic, just so it doesn't feel as harsh. For me, just having a little bit of a softer landing is pretty useful.
Yeah, good. All right, number 5, white balance and color. So talk to me about how you accurately white balance in your room.
The way we've been trying to now is actually based off of our lighting. So we look for what our lights are actually putting out, trying to use a light meter to grab the actual reading of what each light is specifically doing and trying to get those all consistent. So getting lights to match is actually the first part of getting that white balance. Then from there, we actually white balance in camera. So all of our cameras have kind of a preset they load when you power them on. And then our switcher does have CCU control so that I can then rematch. The challenge that comes to is when shots start to change. So you might have a really tight shot that is going to be slightly different looking than a wider shot, just based on different color and different light that's happening in the room. So having that CCU control has been super useful for us. The other thing that I've noticed is between cameras and specifically between lenses, especially if you're comparing like a broadcast lens to any sort of cinema type lens, there's always just a hair bit of difference in how they perceive color. And so sometimes it's just a matter of, all right, white balancers are set, but then I need to just change greens and red on just the highlights on this one camera to make them match. And I will say this is kind of a regular occurring battle that it seems like we have on somewhat of a regular basis. So we try to get things preset, but then have some flexibility to move stuff around as needed, thanks to the switcher.
Do you have a shader or shader station?
That is something that I would love to build in. I think it is great if people can have it, but I think sometimes it's hard to get to that point, only because for us, my priority is having more video directors in the rotation. And then slowly as they get better, I think moving them over to shading is kind of our next step.
Yeah, good. Tell me, you touched on lighting, but tell me how important good lighting is to color matching and all of that.
Lighting is really everything. The more that I've studied all the camera stuff that we're doing, the more solutions come down to how even our lights are, how accurate our lights are, and how they're aimed. So even for a lot of folks that I've talked to in this past season who are moving to video for the first time, a lot of us want to immediately jump to the conversation of, we need to get new cameras, we need to try something else. In reality, a lot of the times what we need is to change our lighting. Because there's a lot of tricks we can do that are not hard. They're very simple, even just with adding, front lighting and then having something behind to help add separation. I think the biggest shift when it comes to lighting for video is understanding that it is all about what the camera sees. So what we might need lighting wise for people in the room to see is going to be pretty simple. We just need a little bit of front light where shadows aren't too harsh. One well-aimed light would do. For video, to make it look like what our eyes see on a camera, lights actually help us do a lot more. So adding those senses of depth, either with, side lighting, different intensities behind and in front between backlighting. For bigger stages that have 2 or 3 rows, a lot of folks will have their front light at say 50%, and then it'll go to 30%, and it'll go to 20%, and then uplighting, using not just the lens to help us create depth, but actually having lighting aid us in creating depth, but also being accurate temperature-wise so that exposure is consistent, and then so white balance is consistent. And it's just hard because you can kind of make a camera do what it needs to do to fix a certain shot, but it's way easier if you start with lighting, get that evenly set, get some stuff moving, and have a solid foundation with lighting. Your cameras will be that much better looking, and you're doing less to kind of fix what's wrong on the camera side.
Good. All right, we're down to the last 2. Number 6 is movement and motion. So talk to me about how you've incorporated more movement, less static shots.
For us, this really only applies when we're using stage cams. A decision that we've made that a lot of folks do, which is fine, is a lot of pushes and pulls and pans across the stage. Just because we only have 2 manned cameras during our regular Sunday morning services, we kind of stick to not doing that and really just stick to static shots. However, on our special stuff, when we have either someone who's manned on a tripod that can move or is totally static, totally moving on an easy rig or any sort of stage cam, we try to incorporate motion, kind of like I said earlier, of looking for shapes, looking for camera movement without necessarily moving the lens. So having the lens stay fixed on a person and then actually just kind of having them sway. And so kind of getting folks to be comfortable with dancing, that's a good start. I think another thing for us that we've done is just giving permission for things to move and defining what that looks like. So I don't want to see a really fast pan, or I don't want to see shake, but a little bit of handheld feel that's smooth, that is swaying, is appropriate in our context for what we've decided. So it's really a matter of coaching folks through what we want to see movement wise, and also explain to them what the movement is for, to help give it a little bit more life. Because in general, when you're watching anything as a human being, our whole bodies are always moving, whether or not we're breathing. So there is a little bit of motion to everything that we're doing. So trying to help recreate that. I think the most important part is just casting the vision for why we use motion, when we use motion. And then secondary is trying to figure out how do we do that together as a team. So want to make sure that we're not doing like a crazy pan shot that all of a sudden I don't have another shot that I'm ready for. So now it's just stuck on a weirdly framed shot, moving between those kinds of things. Yeah. There's a lot to motion for sure. I think it's really contextual on what each person is using. For us, it's been, we're going to keep it simple. We're going to default to being static unless we're doing some special stuff. And that's just a place that I would love to see our team grow.
Yeah. Awesome. You mentioned how the team works together. So that's our last tip and point here is working together as a team. So tell me, and we've touched on this throughout, but tell me, what are some things that you found that have really been successful to make the team hum, to make you guys work together well?
Honestly, the first part has just been getting everyone on the same comm system. It's simple enough where if everyone can hear each other talk, it incorporates the team mentality, the friendliness to it. So when I'm making a call, I think it's great to not maybe laugh the whole time, but have a little bit of humor, have some light-hearted moments. Just having everyone on the same comm system together makes us feel like a team. So I think as simple as that is, that's been super helpful for us. I think also just providing freedom to let people experiment a little bit. I like to give people, a little bit of wiggle room, and then give them some barriers to say, I don't really want to see this. I don't want to see that. I'm trying to get people to start feeling comfortable to grab their own shots. And then if there is a specific thing that I'm looking for, I'll call that for them and let them move back and forth between different shots, that kind of way. So there's plenty of coaching, but I'm trying to get them more on feeling comfortable with getting their own shots, kind of seeing what they can see and really experimenting a little bit. I think instead of just worrying about getting this shot, how can you see the shot differently? How can you focus on something else? Those kinds of things.
And also too, how can I think like a director in knowing where he might be going? So for instance, if I'm doing this one shot, I know that the other camera is probably going to get this particular shot. Or if I see something on screen, I don't want to get the same exact shot. Because I want to give my director something new and fresh and different, or frame it differently, or whatever. So I think you bring up a good point on the comms too, that the more relaxed people are on comm, like there's a point where it can get too crazy and everybody talking at once and to wild. But on the flip side of that, like jokes or praying, during the countdown, or as you are about to go into the service, praying on comm, or sharing encouragement on comm, or things like that. I think really bring the team together. So good point there. Well, man, great points here. Thanks for taking the time to chat. How can we, your website, theproductionpastor.com, tell us how we can keep up with you, how we can follow what you're doing.
Yep. So you can go to theproductionpastor.com. Also on Instagram, and currently working on YouTube videos. I will say it's been a challenge to be a full-time tech director and try to create content this past year or so. So you can just hang out to all those channels and keep your eye on those. I will say we've launched in COVID the Production Pastor community, which is just a spot for people to go and hang out together, talk about what's going on in services, how we're managing COVID together, especially how we're leading ourselves and growing as disciples in this kind of crazy season that we all find ourselves in. So would love to point people to theproductionpastor.com/community.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, man, thanks so much for hanging out. It's a pleasure getting to know you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Hey guys, Carl here. I want to tell you about an awesome online conference that I'm speaking at this month. It's the Church Online Summit from my friend Steve Fogg. The summit is packed with amazing speakers like Nona Jones, Carrie Nieuwhof, Jay Cranda, Amanda Sims, Alan George, Haley Vitruis, my buddy Steve Fogg, and many more, including yours truly. It's a digital event on March 25th and 26th. Reach your community online and mobilize your church into action with the Church Online Summit. You can register now by using our special link at 1230.media/online summit. That's 1230.media/online summit.
The show notes for this episode are available now at makingsundayhappen.com.
Next week on the show, I welcome Nathan Spicer from CV, Christian Vision. Nathan is the product manager at CV. We'll be talking about what they are seeing from the thousands of churches that they serve with their content and with their resources. Nathan is in Australia, so you're going to hear a very cool accent that is not my southern twang. So be here for that. Articles, archives, and resources are all at 1230.media/training. So be sure to check that out. Over 600 articles on the site. And we're honing in on 300 episodes of the podcast. All of it completely free for you. The blog and podcast, all free at 1230.media/training. Well, thank you guys for hanging out. Go out there and create some incredible worship experiences this weekend. I'll catch you next week.
Making Sunday Happen is a production of the ministry of 1230 Media. For show notes, archive episodes, and more free resources for your church, visit makingsundayhappen.com.